Hello, time for another Man in Gray book review. Today's book is The Medieval Anarchy, History in an Hour by Kaye Jones, published in 2012 by HarperCollins. It's 60 pages. This is part of HarperCollins' History in an Hour book series. When most people think of the English Civil War, they think of the war that was fought between 1642 and 1651 between the Puritan forces led by Oliver Cromwell and the Royalist forces led by King Charles I. But there was another earlier civil war in England, one that was much longer, much bloodier, and much more indecisive. This war has been dubbed by historians as the Anarchy. Now, the seeds of this early civil war were planted in 1120 when King Henry I's only legitimate son, William, drowned in a shipwreck. Henry I had over 24 children out of wedlock, but he only had two children, only two legitimate children. One was William, and the other was his daughter Matilda. So when William drowned, it created a succession crisis because William knew that the barons who controlled the country would be very reluctant to have a female on the throne. But he wanted to avoid a possible war, secession, and so he called all the barons together not once but 3 times and had them swear publicly that they would support Matilda as queen after he died. And so they did, all 3 times. But when Henry died in 1135, Matilda was living in France and made the colossal mistake of not immediately coming to England. And as a result, Henry's nephew, Stephen, whose brother, also named Henry, was the powerful Bishop of Winchester. So Stephen and Henry hatched a plot for Stephen to seize power. So Stephen gathered a small force and went to England, and most of the barons supported him. Not all, but most of the barons supported him, as did the people of London. And so it looked like Stephen was going to become king, but Matilda would have none of this. And the barons loyal to her and who kept the promise that they made to Henry I rebelled, and they set off this long war. There was a series of battles taking place over the next few years where neither side could really get control, and Stephen's weakness led to a number of Welsh barons revolting and invading southern England, and then the Scottish king, also seeing a chance to grab power and territory, invaded from the north. So Stephen was trying to fight off Matilda's forces, the Welsh barons, and the King of Scotland all simultaneously, and of course he wasn't very successful at doing that. Eventually Matilda and her half-brother Robert put together an army and invaded southern England. And again, neither side was able to completely control the territories or completely take over the whole country. Matilda invaded in 1139 and basically seized the western part of England, while Stephen controlled the southeastern part, and the rest of England was under control of various barons whose loyalty kind of flipped back and forth. They were being opportunists. They kind of looked which way the wind was blowing, and they'd throw their support. Some of the barons thought that this would give them a chance to set up their own kind of private kingdom, and so there was just complete chaos, and there was continual attacks from the Scottish king and the Welsh rebels, and so for years there was this chaotic period where there was no one complete ruler, where the power in England kind of went back and forth between Stephen and Matilda. The war looked like it was going to come to an end at 1141 during the Battle of Lincoln. During the Battle of Lincoln, King Stephen was captured and held prisoner, and much of his support eroded, but not all of it. And a series of military reverses occurred on Matilda's side, and Matilda went to London to try to have herself crowned as king, but the townspeople in London who were loyal to Stephen rose up and revolted, and she had to flee the city. And so, once again, a period of chaos. And eventually, there was a prisoner exchange in which Stephen was released, and then shortly after that, a year later, Matilda herself was almost captured during the siege of Oxford, where Matilda had to disguise herself and flee on foot across the frozen Thames River to avoid capture. So the war went on for over a decade after this, with neither side able to completely defeat the other. The barons became increasingly war weary. Of course, the people who suffered the most were the innocent civilians whose towns and villages were burned. Many of their crops were destroyed. Lots of people starved. There was just complete chaos. The barons were tired of fighting, and the Catholic Church was trying to keep from having to choose sides, and they were trying to find some kind of compromise that would end the war. And the final breakthrough came in 1152 when Stephen's son Eustace, who Stephen wanted to become the heir apparent. In fact, at one point, Stephen tried to pressure the Catholic Church into declaring Eustace as the future king, the heir, but they refused to do so because they didn't want to take sides. In 1152, Eustace suddenly fell ill quickly and died. And so Stephen was left without an heir, the same situation that had started the war in the first place. And then the barons and the Catholic Church forced Matilda and Stephen to a compromise. And the compromise was this: Stephen would stay on the throne for the rest of his life. But after his death, Matilda's son Henry would become king, Henry II. And so that way, both sides got a chance to be on the English throne, and the barons were satisfied because there would be a male on the throne and Matilda would be shut out. And they both were kind of forced to agree to this treaty. And the treaty went into effect a lot sooner than anyone thought, because less than a year after the agreement was signed, Stephen fell ill suddenly and died. And then Matilda's son Henry became King Henry II, and Henry II went on to become one of the most powerful kings in the history of England. He unified the country, he suppressed the rebels in Wales, he ended the fighting in Scotland, and he seized large tracts of land in France for England. He also fathered two famous future English kings, King Richard the Lionheart and King John. So the war finally came to an end in 1153, after 19 years of indecisive and bloody civil war. The psychic damage done by the anarchy lasted for centuries, though. Now, some people who don't really know English history very well wonder why King Henry VIII was so obsessed with having a male heir. He went through 6 wives and broke with the Catholic Church. And did all kinds of disruption because he was determined to have a male heir. Well, he remembered the horrors of, he was taught the horrors of the anarchy hundreds of years earlier, and he did not want that to happen. He was terrified that if he died and had daughters and no male son to take the throne, that there would be a repeat of the anarchy period. There'd be a civil war and a secession battle, and so he was determined to have a male heir, even if it meant defying the Catholic Church or anybody else that stood in his way. And of course, he was willing to go through multiple wives for that as well. If you are interested in this interesting time period of the anarchy, there's also a series of popular historical mystery crime novels that are set during this period, all written by a woman named Ellis Peters. And in her books, her novels, the detective is a retired Welsh knight who gives up fighting and becomes a monk in a monastery near a small town in the south of England. And he solves various crimes in the neighborhood while trying to stay out of the political fighting going on around the city. As at some point, Stephen's forces are in control, and some part Matilda's are, and he's trying to stay out of the politics of it and solve crime. So if you're interested in the anarchy, the Ellis Peters crime novels are set in this time period and kind of give you kind of interesting insight into what was going on during this period of this early Civil War. The book is The Medieval Anarchy. The author is Kate Jones. This has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.